Well, good day. I am Ramanda Noble Watson, the Director of Communications and Public Relations with the South Carolina High School League. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second installment of Commissioners Chat. So, after a long, busy, I say 7 days, 30 games at the South Carolina High School League State Championships, I wanted to do another installment of the Commissioners Chat just to give you a brief overview of the basketball championships, what we have on the horizon, and as you know, what better way for me to do that than to have Commissioner Stevenson himself come and give us some insight. So welcome in, Commissioner.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to be here and looking forward to this interview.
Yes, we like to have fun when we're doing this, just having a general conversation and give our constituents, our membership, our communities, our fans, just a little bit insight on everything South Carolina High School League. So we're going to dive right in. First thing I'm going to ask you is, like I said, 30 games, 7 days, whirlwind. Can we talk about the basketball championships that was February and early March?
Sure. While we don't have all the feedback yet that everybody experienced, we've got some feedback.
Okay.
It appears that it was a great experience for the student athletes. They're part of history. This is the first time in the history of the league that we've held all classifications, semifinals and finals at the same venue. I think it was a great experience. We're still looking back for some feedback from that. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. I know when we talk about some other things about it goes back to the schools, and they're going to have great discussion on that, and then they'll share with us, what their feedback is and how we want to move forward with that. From the very start, I think it started out great, was exciting. Anybody that had an opportunity to be there and watch it, or was able to watch it on television, I think they will all say it was very exciting games throughout.
Yeah, I had some feedback. Most of it is definitely positive because, they know where they're going. They've played on the floor. Since they were in the semifinals, they had a feel of what the floor is when they advanced to the finals. They didn't have to come in cold for the first time, hitting the floor for the first time, having to go around as basketball players do, finding those spots. They knew where those spots were because they had the semifinals there. I think that was good for the student athletes. What'd you say?
There were so many positives that came out of that. Those things that you just shared were great. And having it at one side truly solved the problem. Where the history has been, we've been trying to find 3 different venues to hold this one event. Well, now we can use one venue to hold this one event. And we recognize that it was challenging, and some schools had to travel a little further than they had in the past. But I would venture to say any school that came from the upper state, there's probably a lower state school that had to come the same distance or further to get to that same venue. We've got to get out of, if we stay with it, let's get out of the thought process of being upper state versus lower state.
Right.
Why don't we just call it a semifinals, finals event? Weekend of champions. Place where champions gather to play.
Weekend of champions. I like that. I'm going to have to write that down. Definitely that. So we concluded that, and now, hey, it never stops in the South Carolina High School League. We have something big coming up next week. Before I get to that, about a week or so ago, I asked her a question. Can you give me the overview and the hierarchy of the South Carolina High School League? So we went to a little whiteboard. I have a whiteboard on my door. So we went to a little whiteboard, and you explained to me the makeup and who's at the top, how it breaks down. So I was like, you know what? The next Commissioners Chat, we're going to give our fans and our viewers the breakdown and the hierarchy. Can you go over what you talked to me about? Because I learned, it was about 5 minutes. I promise you about 5 minutes. And I learned a whole lot. So can you give our viewers the breakdown of the South Carolina High School League?
Glad to. Contrary to what some would believe, this league office is only a conduit. It has no authority to create rules or make rules for the membership. Okay. That really generates from the membership. All of our member schools get together and create the rules that they want to operate under. And actually, we're going to be revisiting that next week, where all of our member schools will get together and review all the rules. We'll call it bylaws and constitution.
Okay.
Review all of those things and see what they want to keep, what they want to get rid of, what they want to change. All that becomes part of it. So we start out with the hierarchy. The member schools are at the very top.
Very top.
Every rule that we have in place was generated by that group.
Member schools,
yes,
not the South Carolina High School League,
the
member schools.
Yes, the member schools. And below them is the executive committee.
Okay.
It made up of members from the member schools who were elected by the member schools to serve as their executive committee, as the overseer of all of those constitution and bylaws and rules and regulations that they have in place.
Right.
That's the next step down. And then below that is the commissioner and his staff.
Okay.
We enforced all those rules that the membership is put in place, and the executive committee has charged us to be the day-to-day operation
Okay.
of
Got
those
it.
rules that are in place. Now, one other piece that's there is an appellate panel, which would be off to the side, but they get to evaluate. They get to make changes to
Okay.
any decision made by the commissioner and the executive committee.
Okay.
Now, the rules are still there, but generated by the membership. But below that, off to the side, because this group is not elected or selected by any of the member schools. This
Okay.
group is actually appointed by the state legislature, one from each congressional district. It's a 7-member panel, and they have the authority to change any decision that has been made by the commissioner and the executive committee. They've been given that authority, and that's the state legislation. And by fact, they have been in place since 2014, I believe.
Okay.
And of course, almost 10 years, and they've served us well.
Okay, and so I know you said the membership, executive committee, and you, the commissioner, but in there, intertwined, is something that's going to happen next week, and that's the Legislative Assembly. So the membership, and I think is the Legislative Assembly, are they made up of different delegates from the membership? How is that? So I know they fall somewhere in there, and where do they fall?
Sure, for operational purposes, it'd be tough for everybody to come in and everybody vote. So what they have is delegates from the membership, and each classification have a certain number of delegates, and those are the voting members on the Legislative Assembly. The membership, those member schools, which all of them will be included, will share with those delegates what vote they want to have on those proposals that have been submitted. There's been about 10 proposals that have been submitted. So they will have to either vote to support it, and it takes a 2/3 vote for it to be passed.
Okay.
And they have to support it, and if we get 2/3 of them, it becomes a new amendment to our bylaws and constitution. If they don't get 2/3 vote, it fails and it doesn't move any further. The membership dictates to the delegates. It's supposed to. Now, delegates may go rogue and say, "Well, I'm voting this way." I've never known that to be the case.
Right.
But they take the vote of the region. Each region has a delegate.
Okay.
And they bring it to the table, and then they vote on it at that time. It's a great experience. The entire membership usually have somebody there that represents every school at that meeting.
So when they do this 2/3 vote, and it passes, is that continual? Is it every year? How are the bylaws and constitutions made up? Is that a yearly document? So what I like to call fluid, is that a yearly document, or do they stay in place for that?
So we take the bylaws and constitution information, and it's reviewed every year.
Okay.
The membership gets to review it every year, keep what they like, get rid of what they don't, change what they think may need to be adjusted. So it's annually that we have this process. It's been working well for 100 plus years.
Wow. Okay. So now we know that the membership, for all those a lot of you probably already knew this, but for those who didn't know, the membership they make the recommendations, Legislative Assembly, they do their 2/3 votes and they pass it, and that's how the Constitution and bylaws are determined. It is not determined by the individuals inside the South Carolina High School League. Now, the rules and regulations, we just the keeper of them, but that's the membership. They do all that. Sure. They do all the lead work.
All the member schools of the league, and we're the office. We're just the conduit. That's all we do. We have very limited authority in what we do. The expectation from the membership and the executive committee is that we follow the rules that they have spelled out for us.
Yeah, I like that. So we're the rules keeper, or we're the keeper of the rules. Let's call it that. Yes. So I'm gonna move away from the Legislative Assembly and the Constitution bylaws, and I'm gonna revisit something that we talked about in our first commissioners chat, and that is the reclassification and realignment. So when we last spoke, you talked about there still was a couple of appeal processes that needed to be taking place. So has that been completed? And if so, are we at the final realignment? Finally, what's going on with that?
Sure. Realignment for the 24 to 26 school years have been completed.
Yes. Okay.
All regions have been put in place. All classifications have been put in place. All appeals have been held.
Okay.
Now our schools can go out and make contracts or finalize their schedule.
Okay.
The reason we place schools in classification and region is to ensure that they have a schedule.
Okay.
Now, it's a limited schedule because there's a fewer number, and they are allowed to the maximum number of sports or contests that they're able to have in their sport to go out and seek out others.
Okay.
But they will be scheduled a selected number of those that are in their region. Those are the schedules that they have to participate in, and then they
Gotcha.
can choose to participate in others.
Okay, so one of the other questions that came out the conversation was the 2 divisions of 5A. Has any further discussion taken place? Has that been decided on? Where are we with the 2 divisions of possibly having 2 divisions for 5A?
Okay, so let's go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the realignment process was that a realignment and reclassification guidelines committee was created.
Okay.
And they came up with the rules, as I said earlier, of the guidelines of which we are to use for realignment
Okay.
and reclassification. Well, one of the recommendations they made in addition to the guidelines is that the 5A class have 2 divisions,
2 divisions.
in their sports.
Okay.
So we're there now, but that they only could make a recommendation. They couldn't make it happen. First
Right.
of all, the 5A class would have to want it to happen.
Okay.
And if they do, and then they will bring that before the executive committee, who has the authority over all the rules and regulations and plans for that, and bring it to them and ask them if that's feasible or if that's something that they can do.
Okay.
If the executive committee approves it, then it becomes the responsibility of me and my staff
Uh-oh.
to make it happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we still don't have a final decision on that. I just wanted to bring it up because I know since we're saying that, the reclassification realignment is finalized, what about the 5A? So that's why I wanted to revisit to see where we were and to let everyone know where we were in the process. Well, we talked about a lot. And I think we definitely talked about it. So after next week, the Legislative Assembly meeting and everything, we have about a 6-week window before we get right back at it with the spring sports championships. But in between that time, what are some of the things that's happening within the South Carolina High School League?
So truly, once we get away from and we leave what we consider to be our spring conference and our Legislative Assembly meeting, there's another meeting that's held by the Executive Committee in April.
Okay.
So that we finalize all the changes that have been in place. While there's
Okay.
constitution and bylaw proposals that have been amendments that have put in place, or that's been considered, and if they pass, we gotta make sure we get that done.
Okay.
But there are also rules and regulation portion that the exec committee gets together and talks about. The budget for next year has to be put in place.
Gotcha.
Any rules and regulation changes have to be put in place. So it's still a whirlwind
Right.
until that point.
Right.
And in the meantime, when that's done, before we begin playoffs again, we are busy rewriting the handbook to reflect what it needs to be for the next year. We've got our spring sports kicked off, which is our largest number of student athletes will be participating
Right.
during that time because
Right.
we offer so many sports. It's an
Okay.
exciting time. Now,
Right.
again, inclement weather sometimes plays a role,
Yeah.
but it's truly an exciting time, and there are championships right after championships. You're right. Once we start the process of playoffs and championships, for about 4 weeks, it just continues to go.
It does. And I know one thing that's coming up that tried to be put in place last year, but as Dr. Simpson spoke about, the inclement weather stopped it. That was the middle school track and field invitation that's going to be held at Lugoff Elgin High School. They wanted to do it last year. Mother Nature said no. So we'll just pray that that's something that can kick off because we want to make sure that our middle schoolers get a chance to compete equally as much as the high schoolers do.
Truly, we've been able to do two invitationals already.
Right,
We
right.
did volleyball and we did wrestling, and we're hoping to do one in the spring, which would be track and field. We're
Right.
excited for that group because
Yeah.
that's the future of the league. That's the bloodline of the league.
Correct.
So we're wanting to get those student athletes acclimated to the rules and regulations of the South Carolina High School League so that when they do become the athletes of the South Carolina High School League at the high school level,
Right.
they have an understanding of what's expected of them.
Well, thank you so much for indulging me and let me pull you out your office yet again, interrupting your work, getting ready for the Legislative Assembly. But I appreciate you coming in and taking the time out to speak with me about the happiness of the South Carolina High School League. I'm not sure when the next one will be, but just stay tuned. Continue to visit www.schsl.org. That's the way to find out exactly what's going on in the South Carolina High School League. I am Romanda Noble Watson, again, the Director of Communications and Public Relations, here with Dr. Jerome Singleton, the Commissioner of the South Carolina High School League. And this has been the Commissioner's Chat. Thank you.